Welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. My name is Sean Slatter, and for 30 years, I've dedicated my life to the science of business development. I've seen the impact of our work, which has evolved into economic development and now social impact. In this episode, I'm so excited to provide this recording that I made with Kristen Cox, who I've known for many years, and she is an incredible individual that I really think you will enjoy this discussion. I recorded this in the middle of COVID in January of 2021, and it really was a recording for our team. And she had just written a new book and had taken a new job, and it was fun catching up with her. I think that this episode you'll learn a lot about our work in especially our social impact. We had a long relationship with Chris while she was the director of the Department of Workforce Services, and then moved into the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. And we worked with her closely in both capacities. And now Chris is an author, a consultant, a teacher of a lot of different strategies. And I hope you enjoy this conversation that I have with my friend, Kristen Cox. I have asked a friend of mine, Kristen Cox, to join me this morning. Kristen and I have known each other for several years. We work closely at the Utah Department of Workforce Services, which we call DWS. And then again, Chris was working for Governor Herbert as a member of his cabinet and director of the Office of Management and Budget. Chris is just a tremendous individual, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And what precipitated this VTC this morning is that Chris told a story about being on the right path, and it really touched both Summer and me, and Chris has agreed to give this presentation to our team around the country. So Chris, good morning, and thanks for being with me today. And why don't you just talk about yourself, and then I'm excited for you to give this presentation to our team.
Great, thanks. It's an honor to be here, and I'm a big fan of Sean and LSI, and you guys have an amazing story and impact, so it's really an honor to be here. So first of all, I am blind, and the world of Zoom or webinars is tricky because as a blind person, I look to where I hear people, and the speaker and the camera apparently on a computer are in different places. So I try to stay focused where I think the camera is, but forgive me if my eyes drift. We're all adapting in this new environment. So I started going blind in my 11, 12, lost a lot of vision. And I'm telling you this part because it informs what I have done in government. It was actually on a kind of a form of welfare for a little bit when I was trying to get through college, Social Security disability, couldn't keep up with college, was just really struggling, and felt what it was like to actually be on the other side of government, the bureaucracy, really good people, but sometimes the systems aren't really helpful for the end user. I'm sure you guys sometimes experience that. So that was a challenge. And eventually I was lucky, but for the grace of God, I had some amazing mentors who were blind, brought me in. I got really intensive training for 5 months at a residential, and started working back in DC, and I've worked for 3 governors now. I worked for the Bush administration for a bit, and just left Governor Herbert. Was there with him for 8 years, which was a very long time to be in that job. It was a wonderful job, but very intense, and promised I would stay until we hit 4.5% unemployment, which we did in September. And then working now, doing my passion is to get government to work for the people it serves. And so setting up a program at the University of Utah, working with some private companies, and doing lots of fun stuff right now. And I can do yoga whenever I want to.
I love
my schedule a little bit, which is great.
It's great.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the story. It's actually pretty straightforward, but it's something that the lesson I learned from that is a lesson I know intellectually, but it's sometimes bringing our intellectual side into what we really feel and believe. And sometimes there's a gap there. But we had gone down to St. George a few weeks ago just to get away, and we were staying at a hotel resort place. And I thought I knew the area pretty well. It's like on a 5-acre campus, and I thought I had a pretty good feel of the layout of the hotel. And I was coming back, to my hotel room. It was night, and I got on the path that I thought I was supposed to be on, and I would walk down the path, and then I would hit this gate, and I was like, what? This is not the path I'm used to. The path I'm used to doesn't have a gate. So I'd walk back out to where I started, and then I'd go down that same path again, thinking, okay, I just have to walk the path better. Or maybe the gate really was there and I never noticed it. And I spent 20 minutes back and forth on the same path trying to figure out, why couldn't I get this path to work for me to get to my room? I mean, it sounds ridiculous now, right? But I finally just said, wait a second. I know this. Question my assumptions. What's my assumption here? My assumption is that I'm on the right path. So somehow I can just work harder, go faster, and somehow this path will take me where I need to go. And I've done that, many times in my life. So I questioned the assumption. I went back out onto the main road area, and I walked farther, and I realized I had taken a path too soon. I had turned right too soon. And I shared that because I think all of our organizations are made up, right? They're a byproduct of our thinking. The results we get are a byproduct of how we think, how we approach problems, how do we find silver linings. And when we're not getting the result we want, it's very easy to blame the path or just keep doing more of the same. We take the same thing and just double down on it, which I was doing. But I've realized that the organizations who can really get a leap in performance, and government organizations, it's about questioning these underlying assumptions that are blocking us. But here's what was also really important for me. The way I knew I was on the wrong path was that I wasn't getting to my destination. I could not find my dang hotel room, right? I knew where I was going, and I wasn't getting there. So sometimes it's very difficult to know if we're on the right path or the wrong path if we don't understand our destination. And I can say for government, that's usually very fuzzy. A lot of vague aspirational goals with buzzwords, a lot of things that are very inward focused. What do I get out of this? Not what am I giving to the customer? Sometimes we confuse the means with the end. That's the one I see in government all the time. We focus in on the strategy and getting solid on the strategy, but we're blind to, if we do that strategy, what's the result we're going to get? So we know if that strategy is accurate or not. We really can't detect the problem without having the context of the goal. And it's one of the most common problems I see in the organizations that I work. It's the foundation. And the hard part is in diagnosing the problem and everything, but that is so key. What's our destination, and are we on the right path to achieve it? Can I talk more about the goals section? I don't know.
Absolutely. And Chris, this could not be more applicable to what we're doing. We've spent the last 2 months, I've had our executive team really focused on our 2021 strategy. And so I love hearing you talk about this concept of what is the destination, what is the outcome of this that we can build the strategy around. So
I'll talk about that because also it's so easy. So I believe strategy is the direction of a solution, right? And if you have a solution, you have a problem. So, and you don't know your problem outside of the goal and the destination you're trying to achieve. So it's, that's the sequential step. And if we understand the goal and the problem, what's blocking us from achieving that goal, the solution, the strategy becomes much easier and much more impactful. But the problem I see with goals, I'll give you some examples. When I talk about inward focus, and I can see this in the private sector, the co-author of a book I wrote, he wrote it from the private sector, I wrote it from the public sector, but I want to be profitable. That's a necessary condition for companies. It's very important. You have to be profitable. Right. You've got to be able to make your payroll. But the real question is, what are you giving? When we've done some research on mergers and acquisitions, for example, it's been very interesting. When you look at Microsoft try to get into the handheld space with Nokia, they purchased Nokia $7 billion later. It was didn't work. But they were trying to figure out what Nokia could give them, not what assets they could give Nokia. But when you look at Google and Android, Google purchased Android with the expectation that they could give a software development platform that would actually help amplify Android, which it did. It was successful.
Right.
Government does this all the time. I've seen goal upon goal, which is about, I'm going to align my services, I'll coordinate my services, I'll comply with federal requirements. But it's not about in economic development. States want jobs to come to us. But the question is, what are the barriers that we're removing for the companies?
Love it.
And those goals, I think, create sustainable trust and relationships. And it's also where we can really think about the value we need to offer. So that's one of the traps I see all the time organizations getting into, is to put ourselves in the customer's shoes and ask what they would say our goal should be. And of course, be profitable and earning share and market share. And I get all that. But I see the companies that have sustainable value over time, I think, have this bigger vision about what the goal should be. So just two more traps I see these organizations jumping into. One is, I talked about the means versus the end, the strategy. So we can work with an agency and they're going to go digital. Okay, great. You're going to go digital. You're going to upgrade your legacy systems, whatever those things are. But so what? If you go digital, if you automate, if you build a new data system, if you actually introduce a new evidence-based model into a social service program, what's the end goal? Again, we can't evaluate our path if we don't know our destination. And when we confuse the path for the destination, we're bound to get lost and not sure where we're going. So being really clear that we don't do that. And I'll teach this to people and they'll say, yeah, we get it. And then they'll give me their goal and it'll be a strategy. We can fall into it so easily. We just slip into it because we see the problem, we want to fix it, and we think that eliminating the problem is the goal. And I would challenge that. I think there's a big difference between eliminating a problem and achieving a goal. Eliminating a problem presupposes the solution. Get rid of the problem. Our solution mirrors the problem. We're focused on something that exists. When we think about achieving a goal, it's about actually figuring out what's missing and creating something that doesn't exist. And so when we get caught up into the strategy and all that stuff, we actually can be a little short-sighted on what we're doing. So that's a really important one. And then this last one I touched on is about vague. I pick on higher ed. I love folks in higher ed. I'm working in higher ed right now, but let's make higher education affordable, or let's empower people with disabilities. These vision statements, which are nice, is directional, but what does it really mean to be affordable for higher education? Right? It's great to say those words, but does it mean we don't grow any more than the CPI with tuition? Does it mean that people leave a student debt that they can pay off with 2 years if they get a job within that field? What do we mean by that? And again, without that clarity, we don't put boundaries on ourselves. And innovation happens in the boundaries. That is the definition of innovation, is that you're in a place and you find a way to get out of it. And that kind of clarity and accountability on ourselves about what we specifically mean a target, I think, is also key as we think about, are we on the right path, to hold ourselves accountable to evaluating ourselves against the direction we're going. Those are some thoughts.
That is such great advice. And so for our team, especially our account executives, our engagement leads and the functional leads that have been involved in building the strategy for 2021, this is exactly what we've been talking about. And Chris, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on strategy, goals, eliminating problems. The timeliness of this was just amazing. So I want to spend just a few more minutes and talk to you about your career. You in your introduction, you mentioned that you had worked for President Bush and 4 governors now, is that right? And 3 governors. And so you and I started working together when you were the director at DWS, and you were amazing. And I want you to know how much I have always admired you and how much I've enjoyed working with you. So you did incredible things at DWS that really changed the direction and outcome of the organization and the overall strategy at DWS. It's been immeasurable, the work that you've done there. What, in your opinion, was your greatest accomplishment at DWS?
Well, Sean, we have known each other for so long. I came into Utah back from Maryland, DC area, right during the Great Recession. And this department is counter-cyclical. Workforce Services does unemployment insurance, Medicaid, food stamps, everything that people need when an economy goes down. And so it was a real challenge. And the thing I think I'm most proud of is when I took that over, I made a commitment that we would, number one, really honor the taxpayer. We would give better outcomes to customers, and honor our employees. A lot of times people are saying, "No, we have to lay people off." I'm like, I'm not going to lay them off. Actually, that makes the economy worse because now we have less money in the economy. So we set a really ambitious target in a system that cost about $80 million at the time. And we said, our caseloads were up by 60%, and we made this commitment. And that's why I talk about the power of the goal, the power of the target. So we are going to become way better in quality, and we are going to try to give money back to the general fund and absorb all those cases with no new money, actually less money, and not lay people off. And we did that. We took the budget down to 50 million. We absorbed 60% increase on workload, and we gave 30 million back to the general fund, because that money isn't our money. Sometimes it's easy when we run a program, it's the taxpayers' money. And I knew for every dollar we spent, it was a dollar that could not go towards mental health treatment or children or back into tax cut, right? So that was the start of my journey of the methodology I use, which is called theory of constraints, to start learning about it. And that was a really successful pilot. And then we did it in other areas. And then that's when the governor came and said, can you do this across the state? And I wasn't sure how I was going to do this, but so I was proud of that, and proud of it's always about the team, Sean. And I know that's something that's really important for you. I know you care about your people. They are our most precious resource. And so also not laying people off to look at planned attrition, right? Just not filling the positions, which means you have to have a longer game plan in place, which was important for me.
So many of our programs that now we have replicated outside of the state of Utah and in multiple other states. DWS was our crucible. And you were so receptive to the work we started with TANF and E2E and the WIOA programs, and you were just amazing to work with and so receptive.
Well, that was huge too, because people were unemployed, and how quickly can we get people back to work? And right. The goal isn't just I think sometimes it's easy to be in this game of who cares the most, right? And you see this in the public space right now. But having been a recipient and feeling like I'm never going to be able to work, I'm never going to be able to hold down a job, not understanding what a blind person could do, that is not a great place to live. And while we need to have safety nets, I think there is something about the dignity of work that's so important. And I personally just really believe that. And the input from your organization to help us think about those programs was just really important.
I just can't tell you how much I appreciated you taking our ideas and letting us run with them. And it really has transformed our company. You were a big part of that. So then you've spent the last 8 years with Governor Herbert as the director of OMB. What a shift from working at DWS to managing the entire state budget. So talk about your shift from DWS over to OMB, and I'd like to hear what your greatest accomplishment at OMB was.
Well, it was an experiment, which was how do you integrate operations with budgeting, which I think is key, because the causes of cost don't show up in spreadsheets. You can't see them in a spreadsheet. The causes of cost are in operations, and those things tend to be invisible to people. It's its own field of study. So how do you surface those things that are causing cost? So that was the experiment. And quite frankly, going in and say we set this target, to be one of the best managed states and to have all of government improve its performance by 25%. We actually hit 35% when I was leaving. And that was a very specific measure. We look at the quality of the system, the throughput, which is how much work can it handle, over cost. What does it cost to deliver a quality product? So we could actually, really count, did we get better or worse? And so we hit that target. I was really proud of that. And in very different environments, some people say, you can't improve how the prison works, or you can't improve how technology does software development. Every system, and this is why I keep going back to mindset, questioning our assumptions. Our organizations are byproducts of our belief systems. And to believe going into an organization or going as you do your strategic planning, there's always opportunity to find hidden capacity to get better outcomes. And not just 2%, 3%, 4%. 35% was like after, when we set that target, it was right after the session. Agencies are like, what? Our budgets have been decimated. But to believe if we're not getting the result we want, we may be on the wrong path. So let's question that. So we really build up a very robust program to work in social service programs, to work in economic development, to work in different areas where we can get breakthrough results for the customer, the taxpayer, and the employees. So I'm really proud of that integration. At the end of the day, we save taxpayers almost $400 million a year in labor that we would have had to pay for. We have fewer employees today than we did back in the early 2000s with almost 1 million more people in the population, and did it with improving quality. So I feel proud of that. And we have rainy day funds, and
Yes.
the economy is doing great, and other states are having to slash budget and services, and Utah's in a great place, not just my office, but the great legislature, the governor, and quite frankly, our private sector who takes the risk. And I think here in Utah, we honor that and understand that, we're living off of you guys. So we've got to be very careful and mindful of where the real value is created.
I love it. And so for those of you that are not from the state and are not following this, for the last 8 years, the state of Utah has had the best economy. We have won multiple awards for the best state for new business, the best state for starting a business, the best economy, the lowest unemployment, and Kristen has been a big part of that overall strategy and working with the legislature and the administration to make that happen. I'm so proud of what you've done in your career, and Kristen, I admire you immensely. I always have, and I've just really appreciated what you've done for the state and for us as a company. So now, what's next? What are you going to do for the remainder of your career besides yoga?
Well, besides yoga, I'm going to get you to do an interview with me about your awesome LSI story.
Great.
And COVID. Okay, but so out of that, my passion is to change how people in government approach problem solving, how we get this triple win outside of the traditional things everyone does, like more reorganizations, a new data system, all this stuff. But they're always focused on everything that supports the work, but not the work itself. So building up a program at the U on that for government specifically in operations. And I'm doing some consulting, and I'm writing another book and working with some private sector companies. And it's a lot of fun stuff. I'm getting to spend my time on things that I really care about, the bigger issues to solve. How do you replicate really good economic development strategies? Every state's doing the same thing. I think there's some ways to improve that. So really, really fun stuff right now. I'm liking this phase of my life, having more control over my schedule.
That's tremendous.
And ski. You're a skier too, I hear, Sean.
I'm a huge skier. That is my real passion. And here's a story that not a lot of people know. I have a niece who's blind, and she lives in Michigan. She came out and stayed with us 2 years ago. She's 22 and had never been on skis. And I spent Thanksgiving weekend with her 2 weeks ago, teaching her to ski. And it was such a great weekend. And
Great.
So I'd love to ski with you. Just tell me when. And
the National Disability Center. I use a guide, and it's a freeing experience for me. So lots of fun stuff.
I would love it. Kristen, thank you so much. I just
respect for you and your team. Just tremendous respect.
Thank you. You are an amazing individual. That just what you've accomplished, and there's nothing that you can't do. I know that we're going to see great things out of you. And you haven't achieved your potential yet. So I look forward to continuing to working with you and developing this great friendship that we've cultivated over the years. Thank you so much for the story, and the timing could not have been better. And continue doing what you're doing. It's incredible. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation that I had with Kristen Cox, and buy her book. You can buy it on Amazon. We'll link it in the episode notes. But if you are an organization that needs quantitative and metric-driven strategy, please contact us and we will help you, especially as we're working with a lot of federal, state, and municipal entities on projects such as IIJA and other initiatives. You've heard me talk about establishing command centers within these organizations. This is a perfect way to start, is through strategy development. And this is a core competency of LSI and really part of our legacy. So we'll link this in the episode notes. Thanks for joining me this week, and look forward to our next episode.